Now we'll be proceeding with the panel discussion on the topic IKS significance and road ahead. First, I'd like to invite Dr. Nomesh Bolia, who is the moderator of the discussion. Dr. Nomesh Bolia Mahodayah, नवदिल्लीस्थ भारतीय प्रौद्योगिकी संस्थायां IIT दिल्ली प्राध्यापकः अस्ति तथा च अयं पब्लिक सिस्टम्स लैब इत्यस्य संस्थापकः एवं निदेशकः च अस्ति। अस्य महोदयस्य ऑपरेशनल रिसर्च तथा च सार्वजनिक प्रणालीषु सार्वजनिक नीतिषु शासनेषु च अनुसंधानस्य विषये महती रुचिः वर्तते। अयं महोदयः भारत अमेरिका साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी फोरम्स पब्लिक हेल्थ फेलोशिप डाट जर्मन रिसर्च फेलोशिप प्राप्नोत्। राष्ट्रीय अन्ताराष्ट्रीय पुरस्कारभाक् वर्तते। एषः अन्ताराष्ट्रीय पत्रिकासु अनेकानि पत्राणि प्रकाशितवान्। बह्वीनां स्टार्टअप संस्थानां मार्गदर्शनं च अकरोत्। सः दक्ष सेंटर ऑफ एक्सलेंस फॉर लॉ एंड टेक्नोलॉजी इत्यस्य संस्थापक समन्वयकः अपि अस्ति। औद्योगिक इंजीनियरिंग संचालन अनुसंधान क्षेत्रे अस्य चिन्तनम् एवं निबद्धतां च विदित्वा भारत सर्वकारेण राष्ट्रीय औद्योगिक इंजीनियरिंग संस्थायाः गवर्नर मण्डलस्य सदस्यत्वेन अयं महोदयः नियोजितः वर्तते। भारतस्य राष्ट्रीय मूल्यांकनं मान्यता परिषदः NAAC शैक्षणिक परामर्शदातृसमितेः सदस्यः च वर्तते। अयं महोदयः मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन IKS विभागस्य प्यानल सदस्यः, निर्णायक मण्डलस्य सदस्यः, आयोजनस्य अतिथिः, अध्यक्षः इत्यादि रूपेण बहुत्र आमन्त्रितः अस्ति। Now I'd like to invite the other panelists one by one. First, I'd like to invite Professor Michel Danino from IIT Gandhinagar, who had given a keynote session on Indian knowledge systems, a key concept in Indian education yesterday. Next, I'd like to invite Professor K. Ramasubramanian from IIT Bombay, who had given a session today on does it make sense to revisit IKS. Next, I would like to invite Professor Rammanohar from Amrita University. अयं महोदयः आयुर्वेदे स्नातकपदवीं तः एवमेव द्रव्यगुणविषये स्नातकोत्तरपदवीं च तः प्राप्नोत्। अयं महोदयः आयुर्वेद प्रशिक्षकरूपेण अमेरिका देशे एवमेव SN विश्वविद्यालये MSc पाठ्यक्रमस्य अध्यापकः अस्ति। अयं महोदयः बह्वीषु परियोजनासु प्रधानपरिशोधकश्च आसीत्। अधुना अयं महोदयः आयुर्सिम सिमुलेशन्स फॉर आयुर्वेद क्लिनिकल टीचिंग इति परियोजनायाः सह प्रधानपरिशोधकः वर्तते। Next, I would like to invite Professor Mohan Raghav from IIT Hyderabad. मोहन राघव महोदयः जैव चिकित्सा अभियांत्रिकीय विभागे विशेषतया कंप्यूटेशनल न्यूरोसाइंसेस तथा मोटर सिस्टम्स क्षेत्रे शोधम् अध्यापनं च करोति। अयं महोदयः भाग्यनगरस्थ भारतीय प्रौद्योगिकी संस्थानस्य हेरिटेज साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी इति विभागस्याध्यक्षः अस्ति। शरीर विज्ञानस्य दृष्ट्या योगस्य आयुर्वेदस्य च यन्त्रात्मकाधारे तस्य महती रुचिः वर्तते। अयं महोदयः भारतीय परंपरायाः विस्तृत परिधेः मूर्तस्य अमूर्तस्य च क्यूरेशन गणकीय विश्लेषणं दृश्यीकरणं च इति विषये शोधं करोति। अयं एलिमेंट्स ऑफ इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स एंड हेरिटेज इति पाठ्यपुस्तकम् अरचयत्। IKS तथा हेरिटेज क्षेत्रेषु शोधकर्तृभ्यः पुस्तकम् इदं बहुपयोगी वर्तते। Next, I'd like to invite Shri Sudarshan from Sidhanta Foundation. श्री सुदर्शन महोदयः संगणकशास्त्रज्ञः वर्तते। अस्य प्रौद्योगिकीय क्षेत्रे 20 वर्षाणाम् अनुभवः वर्तते। अमेरिका, यूरोप एवं भारतेषु प्रौद्योगिकीविद्, प्रोग्रामर एवं अभ्यन्तररूपेण कार्यम् अकरोत्। प्रोडक्ट डेवलपमेंट स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम इत्यस्मिन् विषये 25 वर्षाणाम् अनुभवश्च प्राप्नोत्। अयं महोदयः वैदिकज्ञानपरम्परा विषये संगणक प्रेरितानुसन्धानकार्यं करोति। अयं महोदयः सामाजिक विज्ञानशास्त्रे, शिक्षाशास्त्रे, पाश्चात्य विज्ञान प्रतिकृतीनां विमर्शने निष्णातः अस्ति। अयं महोदयः आनुवंशिकी जनसंख्या ऐतिहासिक भाषा विज्ञानं ज्ञानप्रतिकृतिविषयेषु सक्रियानुसन्धाता वर्तते। अयम् अनेक पुरस्कारभाक् वर्तते। विशिष्टाद्वैतवेदान्तः अयं महोदयेन अभ्यस्तः। आगमशास्त्रे अपि अयं महोदयः निष्णातः वर्तते। अस्य नाम्नि बहूनि पुस्तकानि एवमेव बहवः शोधलेखाश्च वर्तन्ते। Last and final, I would like to invite Shri Vinaychandra Banavathy from Chanakya University onto the stage. Dr. Vinaychandra Banavathy, Chanakya Vishwavidyalaye, Center for Indian Knowledge Systems Kendrasya Nideshakः अस्ति। अयं महोदयः PhD उपाधिं पाण्डिचेरी विश्वविद्यालयात् वेदेषु मनोवैज्ञानिकम् अन्वेषणम् इत्येतत् कार्यार्थं प्राप्नोत्। संस्कृते स्नातकोत्तरपाधिना सह आङ्ग्लभाषायां योगविज्ञाने एवं अनुप्रयुक्तमनोविज्ञाने च बहुपाधिभाक् वर्तते। अयं महोदयः एकः नैष्ठिकः शिक्षकः अस्ति यः योगस्य मनोविज्ञानस्य संस्कृतस्य च अद्वितीयमिश्रणस्य विषये पाठ्यक्रमान् व्याख्यानानि कार्यशालाः च आयोजयन् अस्ति। अस्य प्रकाशनेषु स्टैण्डर्डैजेशन् ऑफ योगा टर्मिनोलॉजीज फॉर WHO विषये एकं प्रतिवेदनम् अस्ति। जैन विश्वविद्यालयस्य प्रेस् द्वारा प्रकाशितस्य पर्स्पेक्टिव्स् ऑन इंडियन साइकोलॉजी इत्याख्यस्य ग्रन्थस्य डॉक्टर अनुराधा चौधरी इत्यनया महोदयया सह संपादकः अस्ति। हैप्पीनेस इंडिक पर्स्पेक्टिव्स् इत्याख्यस्यान्यस्य ग्रन्थस्यापि सह संपादकः अस्ति। अस्य महोदयस्य नाम्नि बहवः लेखाः पत्राणि पुस्तिकाः योगः भारतीय मनोविज्ञानं संस्कृतिः एवं अध्यात्मम् इति एतेषु विषयेषु च वर्तन्ते। Now I would like to hand over the stage to the panelists and the moderator. Thank you.
Namaste, everyone. So let us start by Bidan. You start. Okay, so namaste again, everyone. Let us start by congratulating the organizers for organizing this wonderful program. I think much needed right now. There are queues coming from all over, from people, from the government, from even industry, as we will see in our panel today. Much needed, right time, a lot of focus, and therefore being in this prestigious institute, such a wonderful place next to Haridwar, right next to Ganga, and so on and so forth. Also, you will see that the panel is diverse, people with all kinds of backgrounds, people who are professors who have been trained in the Gurukula Paddhati, for example, Professor Ramasubramanian, and currently in formal academia. Also, somebody who's not even from our country, not born in our country, now in our country, such as Michel. There are people who are not academicians, people who are medical doctors, and so on and so forth. So far, we have been looking at whatever people have to share in sort of a monologue followed by some questions. And as you all are aware, in our tradition, our methodology, dialogue is an extremely important way to know about things. And that's why this panel discussion. What we will do next is we'll open the floor with some initial intervention by each of the panelists. Followed by that, I will have some basic questions to them. We've also collected questions from the participants, also opened it up to other people from IIT Roorkee. We have selected some of those questions. We will ask those questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to the audience. That's going to be the general format. The theme is significance of IKS and the road ahead. So we will talk about why it matters. We will talk about what we can do with it. And we will talk about how this can be taken forward. So let's start with Professor Ramasubramanian. Your initial remarks on the benefits, significance of IKS, maybe some specific examples of how, if IKS comes into our lives and our systems, our institutions, things will change.
One important distinction that one finds between the modern science and our approach to nature is we do not treat nature as brute and stupid. Whereas modern science felt that we can sort of play around with nature the way we like. We feel that we are a part of nature and not to control the nature. Our prarthana actually begins with, there are so many mantras which are there where we offer our venerations to nature. Namo Gnaye Sumate Nama Indraya Namo Varunaya Namo Varunyi Namo Dhyaha. So a reverential approach to nature is something which will help us in maintaining a certain harmony between human and other forms. So this major distinction has been brought out in various ways, in various literature, in multiple forms. So this is unique to our thing. And another unique thing which we have created as a theoretical construct is this theory of karma, which will help us bring in ethics in a very, very, very strong foundation. So with these two remarks, I do not want to elaborate too much. I can come back anytime. So if there are certain clarifications which are required, if these two can be brought in, I think there can be a better harmony with nature. And the second aspect is, so there will be a situation where people can take things much more in an easy manner without getting too much stressed. So these are two things which I want to say. I can elaborate later.
Now, I'd like to request Professor Michel Danino to share his initial remarks again on the same theme.
Yes, it is indeed a question that we are asked all the time. What is the use? And how do I benefit? So, of course, below that question is the assumption that benefit is what will give you a good job with a good paycheck. I think that the biggest benefit to me, and this has been usually my answer, in fact, it was also an answer long back in a workshop on history when a student came to me and said, what's the use of studying history? And we can ask actually the same for all disciplines, including mathematics. What's the use of studying mathematics if you're not passionate about it? My answer has been that if you study history properly and if you study Indian knowledge systems properly, and we hope this will happen one day, it completely changes the child's perspective. Instead of being an isolated individual in time and space, suddenly the child becomes part of a stream of civilization and is conscious, maybe not explicitly conscious, but will get this feeling that, oh, I'm part of this great stream of civilization from ancient times, which has achieved so much. And therefore, you get a sense of self-confidence and strength because you benefit from the energy of that stream. You're no longer cut off. And this is something that is so missing in Indian students, and they're so short in self-confidence. In fact, they get a false sense of self-confidence when they are taught to imitate, Western schools of thought, Western developments, to publish in a Western journal, etc. And it's across all disciplines. It's humanities very, very strongly, and most of our humanities departments in Indian universities and IITs are simply happy following the lines of research that come from the West. They may not be wrong in themselves, but they blank out everything that would arise from Indian soil. And also, even in science, I've been told by very good Indian scientists that we are unable to really have breakthroughs in our lines of research because all our scientists are simply happy following the Western lines of research that are successful with quotation marks. So therefore, this sense of self-confidence is what will also allow our future generations to stand on their own feet and to be equipped to face the challenges of life. Today's Indian students, the smallest challenge that they meet in their professional life, and they stumble. And that is why you have so many, suicides or depressions in professional, the first stages in professional life. And of course, even before, when they fail at some exam or the other, that they just cannot cope with the challenges that life is going to throw more and more at them, because life is getting more and more difficult for all kinds of reasons that we know. They're just not equipped. And now we talk of counseling. So all our institutions have counselors, counseling centers, a lot of sessions to help the mental health of students. Why did we have to speak of that in the first place? Why did we need this? It's like, plastering a crack on the wall. You plaster the crack and you think you've resolved the situation, but the crack remains underneath and it will keep growing. So to me, this is the greatest benefit, that it can really change all this and establish children on a sound foundation, because they have this sense that they're supported by all this knowledge. It's not about learning. It's not about accumulating knowledge. If you do that, it's good, but it's about the sense of inner strength that will automatically derive from it.
Wonderful. And I can, actually, as a professor at IIT Delhi, I can attest to what Michel just said. There's a lot of emphasis on mental health counseling. It seems, when we look at our discussions internally, it seems as if the most important thing that we have to do now is maybe to not focus on pedagogy as much, maybe to not focus on learning outcomes as much, but somehow do something about counseling. Right? Because we ourselves are not trained enough to counsel students. Somehow get that in order. And like you mentioned, maybe by being a part of the entire continuum, maybe they'll get to weather some of the things that they face when they come. Let us move to our next panelist now, Professor Rammanohar. Again, the first intervention is similar. What do you think will the benefits be? Although what we'll speak about, I think many of us would already be aware, but your specific unique insights in that business.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the major perception shift that Indian knowledge system can bring in is the concept of dharma. Just taking it from where Ramasubramanian mentioned, when he was mentioning that we give importance to nature, dharma encompasses this whole concept. We can define dharma as the idea of sustainability. And that is what the world, is needing today. And dharma is a very multi-dimensional concept. And I would also like to point out that it includes the insight that will enable us to bring a balance between spiritual and material pursuits, because they are though abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhisa dharma. I think India is one civilization which has solved this conflict between material well-being and spiritual well-being, in a very powerful way. The second thing, I'm not elaborating further, but the second thing is, when it comes to IKS as a knowledge system, I think what it can do is to expand the scope of our pursuit of knowledge. Because modern science has been extremely restrictive. I just remember a quote: we are trying to live superior lives in an inferior world. By reducing reality to things that we can just control with our experiment, and we are creating a reality which is extremely, myopic and restricted. Indian knowledge system brings us a multi-paradigmatic approach to understanding reality, a pluralism in approach to knowledge building. And thirdly, speaking from my own field, Ayurveda, I think what IKS can bring is the creation of a healthy society, because today medical science is extremely focused on cure and intervention. Sickness is being perpetuated, and then we are finding solutions for that, and reached a point where the future looks so bleak with communicable, non-communicable diseases on the rise. It's simply economically impossible to cater to the number of people who are going to be sick in the future. And Ayurveda brings you this idea of what is called as health intelligence, how to nurture a healthy society. So these are three things that you can come.
And we will come back to your last point again. There's an interesting question from somebody in the audience. Might be good to you. So Mohan, your initial remarks. So Mohan has started, usually our centers of this kind in IITs are called Indian Knowledge Systems. But at IIT Hyderabad, the center that they've started is called Heritage Science and Technology. Innovative use of the word. Hopefully he'll share some insight from why that happened as we go along in the conversation.
On the significance of IKS and why, I would like to start from something that is fundamental, that something that none of us can refuse, whether we are Indian or Western or anywhere. And if we probe deep into what drives all our endeavors, all that we do, somebody may want money, somebody may want fame, position, food, whatever it is, right? Whether it is here in the West or anywhere. Why is it that we want what we want? And the answer invariably is that if I get what I want, then I get happy. And eventually, there is somewhere a realization that what we all are running after is happiness. And I think this concept of happiness or ananda is what has been the bedrock of Indian knowledge systems. And in terms of Indian knowledge systems, they have taken the pursuit of sukha, ananda, or the negation of dukkha to sublime levels, and they've explored the maximum extent to which one can feel happiness. And from here sprouts the concept of the Adhyatma Shastra, which gives you the highest states of happiness. However, they also are well aware of the other kinds of happiness that we do get by eating our favorite foods, watching our favorite show, or acquiring power, position, money, fame, and so on. So by reducing or by understanding the common strain of requirement of any human being, or probably even an animal, which happens to be the pursuit of happiness, the Indic system has identified that there are happinesses of two kinds. One that's of a very high magnitude, which is what we call as spiritualism or Adhyatma Shastra, and the other one, which is the ones that we get from material pursuits. I think the central contribution of IKS to humanity is on, first of all, identifying these highest states of happiness, which is something that you do not normally find in the Western case, at least not institutionalized. Secondly, it's about balancing these two, as Professor Rammanohar said. It's about balancing yoga or the adhyatma with the bhoga or the materialistic pursuits. Balancing these two is the central contribution, I feel, of IKS, and which is why it is relevant even to this day in any place, any country, anytime, and anywhere. For example, if one could look at all the contributions of IKS, whether it be something like mathematics, physics, biology, or it could be Veda, Vedanga, yoga, or something esoteric, the common thread in all of them is that it is trying to get happiness. I mean, it is quite evident from the opening lines of many shastras, like Chanakya talks about, how about dukkha and abolishment of dukkha, whereas Vedanta will talk about Brahma and the jigyasa of Brahma. everywhere, this is always the common pursuit of how do you abolish dukkha? How do I get happiness? And I think this is what makes IKS uniquely applicable because nobody in the world can ever deny that they are after happiness. And if you're going to get a very nice optimized algorithm to achieve happiness of the highest magnitudes and also the happiness of all the smaller myriad kinds which we are anyway running after, then I don't think anybody will say IKS is not for us. Because who doesn't want to optimize what rewards we want to gain? But IKS has this beautiful principle of saying, how do I use Bhoga such that it does not prevent me from enjoying yoga? And that's, as Professor Rammanohar was saying, it's the concept of Judaya and Nishrayas. And it also leads to all the other concepts that we have come to identify today with IKS, whether it is dharma or about having respect for nature and our center and our sense of rootedness and all of it. So in my opinion, this is one reason why IKS is absolutely applicable to anybody, whether it is in India or the West.
So we will come back to this question. Actually, it makes a lot of sense when we do a discussion among ourselves. But there are counters, right, to this, and we'll come back to that discussion. Vinayji, from your experiences with the NEP and Chanakya University now, what do you think are specific examples of how IKS can change the way we are living in the society?
First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers for this wonderful opportunity to discuss some of these issues, which are really very pertinent at this moment, given the kind of the focus that NEP has brought in and the IKS centers all over the country have bringing in. I think some of these questions have to be looked into in a very detailed manner. And I'm also excited and equally humbled by being able to sit along with the stalwarts on whose shoulders I started to see this world. So it's a really wonderful experience. Before coming into NEP and Chanakya experience, maybe I would like to start particularly with my discipline, that is Indian psychology. What are the benefits for the discipline? What are the benefits at the individual level? And how do we harness them are some of the questions that I've been pondering over. First thing, I think as it was pointed out by a few speakers yesterday and today, this is going to bring in a certain paradigm change in which we look at the world and human phenomenon. For example, in the Yoga Sutra, the third and the fourth sutra, which are quite cryptic, but so pregnant with meaning, it says, Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. This is the fourth sutra. In the third one, Trada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. The two key words that we see here is Swarupa and Sarupya. I think this, in a way, signifies what Yoga Sutra, Yoga Shastra is trying to tell, and also gives us an insight towards the whole paradigm shift that it promises. It says when the chitta vrittis, the movements of the mind are slowed down and stopped, then the individual rests in his essential nature, swarupa. See the play of the words here, swarupa, and the next word is sarupya, an identical form. That's the fourth sutra, which says when the vrittis have not been stopped, then the Purusha identifies himself with the objective world. So Swarupa and Sarupya, if I look into the way we read these states from the modern psychology, we use the word normal consciousness and altered state of consciousness. Altered state is something that is incidental or something that has happened accidentally, either through effort or through some means it has happened, but that is not your normal state. That is what the modern approach and modern insight is. Whereas here it says that is your essential nature, Swarupa. And the other one, what we call as a distracted state of mind, that according to Yoga Shastra is an altered state. So it's a completely shift in perspective. What is Swarupa and what is Sarupya? So in this way, there are various things that get implied. Just a couple of examples, other examples here. going forward, the whole, again, psychology, unlike other disciplines, is not a purely objective discipline like physics or chemistry. It is also a cultural construct. It borrows a lot from the cultural understanding of the human phenomenon. And different cultures have different, if not completely contrary, but varied understanding of human phenomenon. Whereas here, again, the idea is everything here is an expression of consciousness. Again, I'm bordering on philosophy, but I'll come back. Everything is an expression or manifestation of consciousness. Whereas in the modern approach, the way we look at it is human being is essentially a biomechanical entity. And consciousness is an epiphenomenon, an emergent phenomenon. So the material, the relationship between the material and the spiritual and the material, I think they're completely coming from different directions. Not just that, just to add on to what else it is going to do at a more practical level, the way we look at the way we understand the human being or the entire set of beings or this manifested universe itself as a spectrum of consciousness, right from an inanimate stone to the highest enlightened being. Everything is a spectrum of consciousness. And within the spectrum of consciousness, there are varied bands, right from perversity to highly enlightened being. Everything is accommodatable. And through sadhana, one can consciously shift one's locus from one position to the other, giving scope for growth and development, not to put him or her in a pigeonhole and bracket them as one particular with one particular identity. So these are some of the serious implications that are possible by bringing in this shift in the approach, and largely it makes knowledge more representative, because what we call as modern psychology again is largely a Euro-American construct, whereas there is a need across cultures that knowledge has to be more representative and democratized. I think this will pave way for that. So disciplines will benefit, individuals will benefit, and of course society would have a larger benefit here. Thank you.
Very interesting example of how, what is normal and what is abnormal itself sort of changes as we change our perspective. Sudarshan ji, you have a very different experience from all of us coming from the industry. Your thoughts on what role and the significance of IKS for us?
Okay, so namaste all and namaste T. Murthy ji for organizing this, and thanks a lot for accommodating this sort of a larger heterogeneous audience. It's wonderful. So, coming from sort of mainstream, or let's say the commercial view of the world in terms of consumption and everything being a function of consumption. So what does it mean to consume IKS? Okay, so what we are doing here is a product evangelizing exercise of IKS, right? So what Murthy ji is doing is also a product perspective of what IKS will help us build, or rather the assumption is we're going to do nation building on our own terms. That is what Ramasubramanian ji is saying, Michael has been saying. So given all of that, a very significant role that engineers could play is how would you look at IKS, or in a way, all of our traditional systems can be looked at purely from an engineering perspective, right? Even Bhagavan himself manipulates Panchabhutas to create the entire Jagat. Given that perspective, that all of this Srishti is actually engineering, right? So how do you look at IKS purely from an engineering angle, given the context that we are at IIT Roorkee, right? So given that perspective and given the notion of product, right? So you mentioned the notion of Ananda. So all of these are attributes of a consumer. I want this, I want that, what do I get? So how would we be able to use product management principles, okay, to actually even internalize this? So all of this, so currently the handle Western knowledge system, they have created a product that we are consuming. All that Michel mentioned, the entire career trajectory, all of that is something we're trying to consume as products. as academicians, as sort of a stereotype of a consumer. Now, in the real world, again, all of this is broken, right? In terms, yes, there are structures that Western systems create, the structures that we are trying to create. But in the real world marketplace, right, all of these are broken into actual real world, what they say, the rubber hits the road kind of thing, right? For example, the top companies in the world, for example, Apple, Google, etc., would say that we do not have any hiring constraints. Anybody can come and join us without a degree. What does that even mean in terms of what is knowledge, right? In terms of what is skill? Is it something that we learned only inside an academic setting? All of these questions have been answered in our Gurukula system, right? Now, what does it mean to transplant all of that into actual real world IKS ecosystem of academia, of product building, of engineering, and very impactfully, all of this is very directly going to help your economy, right? Could I build, let's say, $1 billion ecosystem around Ayurveda here? Are we trying to do it? Or are we trying to piggyback on Western systems to do it? That's what we're doing. How much of Indian entrepreneurship is inside the yoga industry? Less than 5%. Everything is going to happen like that unless we look at all of our knowledge systems and the models that we can build with our drishti from a different perspective, from a product angle perspective, from a consumer's perspective. Now, how that can be done? How can academia help? I mean, one example is one of the posters in the morning, right, was posters on Natya Shastra, theoretical model of Natya Shastra. Now, if actually there was theoretical work done in Natya Shastra, we should have been able to use generative AI, the whole upsurge generative AI, to actually produce images, videos, text, etc., based on principles of rasa. Are we even doing it? Are we even thinking that way? All of IKS, one way is to look at it as models, right? Models of seeing world phenomena, natural phenomena. Western systems have a very restricted way, like Ramasubramanian said, very restricted way of looking at these models. We have a much richer spectrum of model building. And Michel also actually said in the panel at the MOE Delhi, IKS is a plural. So we ourselves have multiple knowledge systems inside India. So because of that, we have a very significant advantage. We have a significant meta tool set to actually evaluate different knowledge systems, which nobody has got. So given that larger framework perspective, how do we put in WKS into that? It's just one more system we're analyzing and use our principle of meta-analysis to figure out what can I get out of WKS, which I can use, and what I don't want. I should be able to analyze physics using the principles of Nyaya. I should not call Vaiseshika as Indian physics. Right? These are all basic things that could be attempted in not just an academic setting, but also in the collaborative setting of actual product definition, product experience, and the larger engineering perspective. So that sort of, I think, a lot of enriching can happen once that perspective also opens up, both in policy making and in terms of funding that people get, and in terms of research that can be done.
Thank you. So, but we'll come to one question from the audience again. Already that will sort of challenge this. We'll come back to that. But having done this initial intervention, let me move on to Professor Ramasubramanian, more as a naughty student of his than as a colleague and a panelist. So the reverential approach to nature that you talked about, of course, it makes a lot of sense. All of us will agree. But a counter question is, does that reverential approach lead to blind faith also sometimes? Can that happen? And how do we prevent something like that?
Somehow, not having this reverential approach has really put us into various forms of disastrous situations is something which we need to understand. I tell you, this reverential approach, when I mentioned, this is something which is extended from the human to other beings. What we do not today have is even reverential approach towards the other person who is a part of your family. Be it your son, be it your wife, we have a certain feeling that my feeling is something which is superior to other feeling. It is in the happiness of the other being that your happiness lies is something which is completely missing. I will give you one simple example of how we have lost as elite people and how the other community which has not entered into the corridors of this is still maintaining. I had a certain occasion to interact with a worker who came from the UP-Nepal border. And this person had two options. He could have just stayed nearby within half a kilometer from IIT campus, whereas he was actually moving to another place which is almost 3-4 kilometers away, but he has to go by walk, he cannot afford auto. I was asking him, why are you going there and staying? And this person's simple answer was, the person who is staying there is a relative of mine, and I would not like to hurt his sentiments by staying here rather than by staying there. Now, this kind of attitude is completely missing. So this reverential approach, when I talk about nature, we are considered as a part of a nature and we are not separating us from nature, and you are not able to extend this to your own family is a major issue that is being faced, and that is why all sorts of problems arise. Now, in a very beautiful way, one verse says, I don't remember the first half exactly, Yaksharam Paramam Dukkham, Yaksharam Paramam Sukham, something like that. So the answer is, Mameti Paramam Dukkham, Namameti Param Sukham. Now, this is something which we need to understand, which only our philosophy can offer. After all, you have gained something, you did not bring anything. So this is not a blind faith. So respecting something in nature is with a certain attitude that I am a part of it, I am no special person. If at all you are a special person, as Rammanohar was mentioning, it is only with reference to the dharma aspect. What is this dharma? This dharma is to respect every other being. It is my duty to respect. You are no way superior if you just understand. Ahara nidra bhayamaithunancha samanyametat pasudhar naranam. Dharmo hi tesham athiko visheshaha dharmena hina pashubhis samanama. As you are trying to explain the soil mechanics, I mean that has its own Chaitanya functioning in some way. After all, it is the response to something which we call as Chaitana, right? It is the response to something at a deeper level. If you just conceive of, everything responds to every other thing. And we are not able to capture how they are functioning. They have their own mechanism of remaining in harmony with each other. And this fellow, thinking that he can conquer everything by understanding a certain phenomenon, has landed into various things. So this is what I would just say.
No, yes, please. Yeah, please.
Because when you were asking the question, I thought, what about blind faith in science and technology? Because the critical situation in the 21st century, especially as far as climate and environment are concerned, which will impact everything else, was created by the wrong use of science and technology. There is a blind faith there. And I faced this blind faith in IITs when, we are told all the time that technology is going to solve these problems. So technology is supposed to solve the problems that technology has created in the first place. I have nothing against technology. I mean, they're beautiful things, of course. But this is,
In fact, there is far more blind faith there than here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and one can see that when even now, people who probably would not even have done their bachelor's, they talk about atoms as if it's like a solar system, with all those electrons and protons. And then we realize, science itself realized some years later after Niels Bohr presented the model, it's not how it looks at all. In fact, the solar system itself is not such a beautiful shape that we make it out to be.
In fact, just to add one more thing. It is this IKS which brought me a very, very clear vision that all that we have is only models. We cannot really mimic nature. We can only try to come close to it. This has been very beautifully understood in IKS, whereas, as Michel tried to point out, just The science tries to claim that we have understood everything. At the beginning of 20th century, physicists had the audacity to say that if I have a machinery which can do this computation, I will be able to predict what the universe will be a few hundred years later. It was completely shattered. Exactly.
And what Professor Ramasubramanian also mentioned, in fact, just, it's probably not a big leap if we don't revere or respect nature to not respecting our own family members. Probably doesn't take too much once you get into that mode. I think a week back, some of us IIT faculty, we were discussing how it is so difficult for parents today to imagine living with their kids because they don't want to respect the sentiments of anybody else apart from themselves. Not our parents, when we become parents, I'm saying, whose kids will be old enough that, I need to have my own privacy. I need to have my own life. I need to live it in my own way. And if I start living with my kids, then of course that's not going to happen. So just 10 more years and we'll be in that situation where it will be so difficult for a country like ours for parents to live with their kids. It makes a lot
Just
of
only one minute. I'll not see since you raised this issue. I had an occasion to be outside India. And there was an occasion in which myself and my colleague were working late in the night in their house. And the husband went and told the wife that tomorrow our son has an exam, but he is playing now. So she said, why don't you tell? Then he said, no, he will not listen to me. Why don't you come and tell? She said, no, I will not come. Then I volunteered, I will come with you. I'll tell you what happened. So I went to that room. He opened the door and then said, why don't you have your studies commenced instead of playing? Then the first answer the boy gave was, how dare you enter my room? This is my room. Okay? Okay. Enough.
Yeah, no, wonderful. So thanks. Now let's shift gears a little bit. We have talked about why this is important. A part of this panel is also about what direction we take in the future. And this came repeatedly, multiple sessions that happened in this conference, as well as you would have seen in other conversations across. Professor Ramasubramanian talked about how that gentleman in the committee was not able to appreciate why 4 can be Veda, right? Things like that. I also was talking to Professor Mohan, and he talked about the challenges that he had to face. I know about the challenges that IIT Roorkee had to face in even proposing such a thing in this own country. Right? So this is where we are right now, right? Where a large bunch of people who supposedly matter in society, right? Who are maybe professors, who are maybe in powerful positions of the government, are simply not able to appreciate or accept the importance of all of this, right? So given this context, this question is open to anybody who wants to answer in the panel. Given this context, there is this world which doesn't even accept that 4 is Vedas can be taught to kids. And this is our world where we are trying to say most of the things that we see around us should probably be driven by the wisdom and the knowledge that we have accumulated. So how do we transition? What should be our future strategies going from here to where we want it to be? It's a major problem. It cannot happen in one go, of course, but what should be the steps? What should be the pitfalls that we should avoid? What are the kind of things that we should be doing?
I think the first step is to acknowledge the errors of the past. I'm talking about the industrial revolution age and all the wrong directions that we have taken. In India, we are only beginning to understand, for example, that the green revolution was not such a good thing after all, and it is not sustainable. In many ways, it was an error. It could have been designed better, but it was designed completely on Western patterns of agriculture. All right. And the same thing with dams, this multiplicity of dams and dams which initially were even patterned on designs of US dams, where rivers do not carry much alluvium, whereas Indian Himalayan rivers in particular do carry a lot of alluvium, which ended up creating lots of problems for the dams. And the way we are continuing to even want to design more and more dams, which are actually impacting the ecosystem in which are absolutely disastrous. So we're committing, I can multiply examples, but in the interest of time, I'll just stop there. Medicine, of course, there are enormous errors in the approaches. We have experts here. we have to understand these errors. And in fact, a lot of independent thinkers are beginning to be very loud about them. But we should have, if we had this original mind that IKS would give us, if we had this, what Shri said, he called it he wrote beautiful articles on the importance of original thinking. This was at the beginning of the 20th century. And he insisted that if we are rooted in Indian knowledge traditions, he didn't use exactly those words, then we'll be able to create fresh thought. We're not able to create fresh thought and to even read all these mistakes because we're continuing on models which are given to us from outside. So this is to me the first thing that we have to do, identify all the wrong directions we have taken and standing on our feet again, what are the options? What are the workable solutions? Because ultimately we have to work out solutions for the system. What are the solutions that these Indian knowledge traditions lead us towards? So a lot of thinking has already been done in many fields, but we have to make this thinking become mainstream. It is marginal. That is the big challenge.
So the question is, how do we undo what we have, gotten ourselves into? And I honestly feel that even, let's say we have taken 10 wrong steps away, you cannot undoing it by pressing the undo button 10 times in the reverse direction. If we ourselves think how we were, those of us in 40s can rewind 20, 30 years back. Those of us in 60s and 70s will have to rewind, let's say, 50, 60 years back. And I'm pretty sure each one of us have probably done the same things that the folks in 20s and in the teenagers of today are doing. So I feel it's the one way to rectify things is to start where we are currently and finding a way to where we want to go rather than try and find out how do I undo. Because focusing on undoing will lead us through paths which are actually not traversable. Whereas thinking of this as a new problem, saying this is where I want to get and getting there will probably lead to it better. More practically speaking, if we look at how, what are the desires of, let's say, the teenagers and the young ones of today, we somehow have to hitch the goals or values that we seek to foster onto their aspirations, their thought process. I know it is very difficult. It may look very, practically impossible, so to say, and say, I mean, that is what these kids want. How can we even, get them there by, pandering to their things? I would only say that this is not a completely unheard of thing, even in IKS. If one looks at the opening chapter of the Bharatanatyam Shastra, you will see that the sages of those times were in exactly the same position, where the sages are saying, they're bemoaning rather, saying that people are no more interested in this, people are no more interested in this, they refuse to do this, they can't do this, they can't do this, and they ask of Brahma, saying, Kridaniyakam, Kridaniyakam ichhama. So they want a play toy or a way to amuse themselves. However, it is not just an amusement, it's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse, but within this play toy or an amusing procedure, what they integrated was the essence of the four Vedas. And hence it becomes a Panchama Veda. So this is a strategy that within IKS, you see how they bring back a society that has, digressed. I feel that's probably one, inspiration that we should take and use rather than say that, oh, these people are completely hopeless. We need to accept that this is how it is and see from their aspirations, how can they give them something that matches their aspirations, but that's loaded with a Trojan that will take them to the right place.
We can see a computer science professional talking here. Please.
I think when you look at the future, the first and foremost thing that we must focus is on rediscovery of this knowledge. Ramasubramanian ji was also mentioning in the morning about, how we understand from the sources. Uh, this is very, very important. We need to reconstruct, the Indian knowledge system framework. So substantial time will have to be spent on this rediscovery and proper understanding. In the context of Ayurveda, this because Ayurveda is a system, which has survived. Is one example of an Indian knowledge system that has overcome all vicissitudes and challenges, continued to be a living tradition. And in the Ayurvedic tradition, we have this concept of how to renew and re-express itself from time to time. This is called as Yuganurupa Sandarbha. So it is not going back. When you think of bringing IKS into modern life, it's not going into the past and reinventing, how it was practiced in those times. Ayurveda has given us a outlook which is forward, moving. And in order to do that, it gives us a framework of the IKS, Tattva, Shastra, and Vyavahara. There are three things, three levels at which IKS knowledge systems function. The Tattva is the principle. There is no equivalent because we have theory and practice. In Ayurveda and IKS, we have something beyond theory. Shastra is theory. These are models. And you can keep creating models of nature and how we understand it from time to time. Ayurveda Shastras have changed over time. And then there is a Vyavahara or the practical application. So when we are thinking about the future of IKS, we are thinking of how this knowledge can be applied to solve human problems, which is Vyavahara. But in order to do that, we cannot take the Shastra or Vyavahara of a bygone age. I think that is a big danger that when we think about IKS, we are talking about how it was practiced and trying to. So as Vagbhada says in one of the textbooks of Ayurveda, Yuganurupa Sandarbho Karishyate. I'm going to reinterpret this Shastra, understand the principles, reconstruct the Shastras, and bring about an application that is relevant to solve today's problems. So I think this is the approach that we have to take for the future.
Wonderful. So I think these were some of the views. I think when we get questions from the audience, some more similar questions might come. But coming back to the point of young people, Mohan, and their aspirations and all. If there is one thing that I'm very positive about today, like with my students, it's that they definitely are not in the nonsense type of mindset that my batch, for example, was. Right? They do want to explore. I think they've lost quite a few baggages from the past, and that's extremely positive. And the glimpse of that will be visible in the questions itself that I'm going to now ask. Very interesting questions. It was, I spent maybe an hour and a half yesterday, last night, just trying to filter those questions. We had maybe about 150 to 200 out of which we could only filter out, 5 or 6 to ask here.
No,
the first,
can I quickly come back to the earlier question?
please. Yeah. While I choose a question, please go ahead.
I think continuing with what other speakers have mentioned, the way forward, I would like to allude to a friend's approach that he is developing. This is Raghav Krishnaji from Brihad. Says that there are 4 sequential approach which is quite helpful. The first one is, which Subramaniam ji was also pointing this morning, creating that wonder in the youth. Like the moment you see some of these temples, some of this architecture, or just have a exposure to Panini Sutra, it's such a beautiful construct. I don't know if we can come across a parallel of such thing that has been ever created by the human mind in any part of the world. So, yeah. So some of these things are so beautiful, elegant, and beyond time and space. Just an exposure to them would create a sense of wonder. So amusement, which Raghavanji was speaking, or wonder, or Swami Vivekananda's words, fascination. I think creating that would be the first thing. The moment that is brought in, I think it is for the students or the youth naturally develop this gratitude for the gift that they have received from the civilization. I think even if we experientially look into our own stories, probably we have come into this field because we have felt that deep sense of gratitude for what we have received. So wonder followed by gratitude, that leads to curiosity to explore more, to understand more, and to see what relevance that is going to bring in for the current times. That's where the Shastra part and the Vyavahara part also clicks in. And the last one is ownership. So from curiosity, it leads to belongingness and ownership. And that is when they get into a contributive mode. So far, it was a receptive mode. But here, you have received it, you have processed it for yourself, and now you're trying to see how best can I contribute towards the forward linkage. I think this would be the way forward. This also addresses the question of how do we institutionalize a case. Perhaps institutions could consider, of course, there is no one set way of doing things. How do we create that wonder? Maybe IR, VR, all these things could help us in that regard. There could be many other possibilities, but I think this sequence makes a lot of sense to me personally. Thank you.
Fascination to curiosity to belongingness to ownership, right? That's what you're suggesting. But coming back to your AR VR thing, it's a very interesting question posed to Professor Mohan by, I think, one of the participants. So the title of the question is it feasible to develop AI and VR AR? It's an interesting question. Considering we are already trapped, he's written trap, he or she, but I think it's trapped through our consciousness in this Maya and further distorted by matrix. We're already in a Maya world, right? Which already makes it difficult for humans in today's time to connect with themselves. Isn't creating a metaverse and, for example, products such as Neuralink by Elon will distort and absolutely disconnect one with our soul? So are we creating a Maya within Maya? That's the question.
Well, absolutely true. I mean, any device that you create is just an engine, but the direction the car takes is determined by the steering. So having a powerful engine is always a cause of concern. Everyone is going to be concerned. If I have to give a bike to my son, I'll say, oh my God, no, let's take care. But everybody knows that, if you keep the steering and the handle straight and right, you will eventually reach, right? So the question is only of how you deploy the engine. So the answer in short is, of course, AI and, of course, let us not bring Neuralink into the picture. It's a completely different ball game. Okay. But I will just restrict the answer to, AI, VR and things like that. So in a time when, kids are anyway addicted to, video games and to the virtual world, I will read this question as, is it a good idea to use AI, etc. for IKS? Because you are actually, are they going to get trapped in Maya? I mean, let's look at it this way. This chap is always anyway stuck to video games, right? Now, do you think by denying him his video games, he's actually going to say, okay, fine, you didn't give me, I'll go. There will be some proportion of people who will, who will do this. Okay. So Prabhu Samhita. Right. So some people will say, okay, fine, you have ordered and I accept it and I'll go again, with it. But a large proportion will not. They will find some way or the other to satisfy their craving for some more digital entertainment. And in such a case, giving them the right set of digital content brings in them a set of, appreciation of these values. And you hope to make a small next step, a small nudge towards the IKS, because if you don't give it to him, he's going to watch maybe Lord of the Rings or something else, and Age of Empires and a lot of other things anyways. So if you give him something here, at least he will come back and ask you, okay, what was it about Hanuman jumping across? Or how is it that he did this? Why didn't he do that? And that keeps running in his head for the whole evening. I mean, there's not a imaginary situation. I have a son, 12 years old, and I'm talking from living experience. He, like any other kid of that age, he's crazy after digital content and video games and all that. But thanks to a lot of content that comes up, at least for part of the time, I managed to get him into this world. And then at night when he's sleeping and he's not yet slept, he pokes you with questions. By the way, I saw this in this particular thing, but why does he do that? Why doesn't he do this? Fine, we've got a small window of opportunity to get into this thing. And this is what is Trojan horse. And I think to this extent it helps. But then nevertheless, we have to be very careful. A powerful engine can always be disastrous if we do not.
I think we'll discuss this separately, but when a slope is very slippery, do we still use it or do we just remove the slope is the question, I guess, but we'll come back to that. One question for you, it has been going on in my mind. I've asked several students of mine, I've also discussed, and good to see that this is a question that has come up in some participant. How can Bharat produce the masters in IKS, for example, in treatises like Sidhanta Shiromani or Tarka Samagraha, along with modern physics and science? How do we produce stalwarts using pedagogical practices of IKS?
In fact, I get this question in different forms. I don't think we have lost the power to create texts of this nature. Somehow we have been underutilizing the power that has been endowed with us. Sidhanta Shiromani or the Tarka Sangraha, etc. These are things which have influenced certain minds even in the very recent past. And there are scholars who are capable of producing, but we have lost a certain situation wherein these have been valued at all. So the society recognition for a certain thing is extremely important for the intellect to flourish and then keep producing along these lines. My strong feeling is today we are in a certain situation where this exposure to these things itself has become so minimal. Not everybody is equipped with great intellect. We have to first of all accept. Okay? So there is a beautiful verse which says, the teacher actually teaches the same way to all the 50 students. 5 may get it well, 1 may get it much beyond what the teacher says. There may be other 5, so who may be getting what the teacher says and so on and so forth. Now the creative mind, so first of all, needs that kind of an exposure. And we have to return back to that state where I am not very, very pleased with the way we have underutilized our mind. So even in my class, sometimes I may have to just fire the student that he feels that he will be able to get it somewhere else and later reading, etc. When something is being said, you can't focus. So that's why I showed that slide where I'll tell you one simple example. When my father was in 50s, even 40s, he was trying to learn from a neighbor who was 83-year-old. That person actually teaches by closing his eyes for 1.5 hours. And he will say only once, but with absolute clarity. The students have to listen carefully. So this ability to process things and then retain things is very essential for creating such wonderful literature. So it has to be there every time. I cannot be just flipping this and that, etc. So that ability has to be nurtured is what I would just say for anything to come later. So this, in those days where the manuscripts were very rare, so this compulsion was there. And even if it is not a compulsion today, I think we need to appreciate the strength that we have been endowed with. And for whatever reason, we felt that even we need not do the multiplication table, etc. We have this calculator. So this is, I think, a very sad situation.
So recognition, you're saying, in an environment where such
recognition and recognition is one thing that society has to build when something is being created. And that is there in every other region, but this has been completely neglected. Like my own example, when I was trying to enter into this domain of history of science, people were warning me. I did some reasonably good work, okay? So soon after my MSc, which would have been simply turned into a PhD degree. But then people said, if you get a degree in this, you will be like a Trishanku. Neither you will be a historian, nor will you be a scientist. So you will just experience the Trishanku problem. So therefore, you better get into physics. So that's why I went back to nonlinear dynamics, chaos, and then did a PhD. So that is one thing. So somehow, I mean, we have been neglecting. Secondly, even I must tell you, see, there are some very bright people here. I mean, even in our own audience, I don't want to take the name, but I'm just saying, so their abilities are phenomenal. Not everybody will be able to equip, but we have to just expose them. Okay. And the third thing is, as I was telling, the right exposure is also very important regarding a subject matter, and that is a different issue. But to enhance this ability of creativity, so we have to necessarily bring in this aspect of keeping things in mind, which we feel that it is completely not essential, which is not very true.
Thank you. This is a detailed question. Please bear with me while I read it out. I think it's important enough that I read it out fully for us to be able to get the context behind the question. It's for you, Michel. Considering the current landscape of Western analytical Marxian and deconstructivist approaches in academia, including our country, I aspire and work for the development of a robust culture studies framework rooted in Indian ethos, drawing from archaeological, historical, spatial, textual analysis. The synthesis aims to establish a genuine Bharatiya Samskriti Adhyanam characterized by its holistic nature and incorporation of both contemporary and indigenous community history. My poster presentation was aligned. The question is, could you share your perspective on the academic validity of this aspiration?
Well, it's fully valid because that's exactly what the national education policy is trying to do. And yes, it's a major paradigm shift which is attempted, which will not happen overnight, because as I said, there are too many gaps in the last decades. So it will take time to rebuild the base, but the vision is there that we have to now take the roots. And that's why if you read, in fact, I'm happy to announce that yesterday night, Ministry of Education publicly released on its website the National Curriculum Framework. So I invite everybody to read it, and you can download it and read it. And there is one chapter which is called Rootedness in India. Please read that chapter carefully. I think it gives a pretty good answer to that question. And yes, it's a valid aspiration. That's what we, I think, are all aspiring to correct eventually 75 years of wrong direction in the education system.
Absolutely. So whoever has posed this question, if you're here, please have a look at the National Curriculum Framework, the Rootedness in India chapter. So question for you, Rammanohar ji, is, and this is what I was referring to when I said we'll come back to this, is kindly explain how IKS, I think this person means Ayurveda, deals with public health issues. So, I mean, if public health was to be, let's say, given to the Ayurvedic ecosystem, how would you handle it? Maybe how would it be different from the current THC, CHC sort of a setup that we create?
You know, Ayurveda was one of the earliest systems to talk about preventive health. So one of the major strengths Ayurveda would bring into public health would be the preventive element. You know, not treating a disease after it has been created. So, and Ayurveda also brings us a very environment sense, because public health, Ayurveda says diseases are caused in two ways. One by causes which are unique to each individual, and one by causes that are common to all the individuals. So in one, we need a very individualized approach. When you have illnesses that are caused by individual karma, and the other which is caused by collective karma. And we have a concept called Janapada Udhvamsa. Janapada is, you know, the public, and Udhvamsana is destruction of the Janapada. And this happens through a mechanism. Tasya Moolam Adharma. Everything begins with Adharma, then the Desha is affected, then Jala is affected, then Vayu is affected, and then the Kala is affected, and then Janapad. So it's a very detailed, I'm not going into those details. And that these determinants, we have to work on that. Today, we are completely ignoring that. We are continuously creating diseases, and public health means managing the problems after they have been created and without, trying to prevent them. When I was a student, in the 80s, we were all taught about this WHO slogan, Health for All by 2008. I'd even wondered how that is possible, that by 2080, everybody is held something which we can distribute as a commodity through pills and medicines. And come 2000 came AIDS, the big problem. And, uh, after that, WHO became wiser and it started talking about universal health coverage, not health for all, but health coverage for all. And then came COVID. And the countries with the most access to, advanced healthcare, they suffered the most. So what Ayurveda has been talking about is pratnya, which I would like to translate as arogya buddhi. Our goal in public health should be arogya buddhi for all, or health intelligence for all. By empowering the individual, we can create, this is a intervention that Ayurveda can really bring to the field of public health. And, in that way, we can prevent a lot of diseases, especially even both communicable as well as non-communicable. Even though it is controversial, during COVID, in spite of all the challenges Ayurveda faced, a huge contribution Ayurveda could make in minimizing, the effects of COVID. And so these are some of the thoughts that I have to share.
I want to ask you a small question. See, whether this existed in India, because I was told by a great scholar of Chinese acupuncture, among other things, that in the ancient Chinese system, the family doctor was paid in kind of cash or whatever, as long as everyone in the family was healthy. And if somebody fell sick, then he would stop being paid. So in other words, he was rewarded for keeping everyone healthy and not rewarded if someone, was there any sort of?
Yeah, they're similar, not exactly the same, but we had that system was there in Kerala even right up to modern times. That a physician, it was not, the physician shouldn't dependent on the patient for his survival. So his needs would be taken care of in other ways. So that when a patient comes, like such free treatments were done in Kerala, we have documented that. It's with community participation. So especially in the case of snake poison healing, this survived. That when a patient is bitten by, when somebody is bitten by a snake and comes to the Vishavaidya's home, all the resources are made available, including the neighbors are the people who they are trained in that. And the courtyard of the physician becomes the ICU. And in a few, we have documented this actual process that happened even a few decades ago. So they created a system. The Vaidya has all his facilities. He doesn't have to charge the patient for his survival. Such a system was also.
One last question and then we'll move to the audience. And I request the audience as well as the speakers, the panelists to be brief so that we can end on time. People are waiting for the lunch now. It's high stakes time. Indian knowledge systems, how do we incorporate such valuable knowledge? This is for you, Vinayji, to deal with certain sociological stereotypes related to gender, caste, and discrimination. So what does IKS have to say about gender and discrimination?
I think the basis of the question is the focus on points like personal liberty, pluralism, mutual respect. I think these are the principles. And if we look into our tradition, I don't see there's any other tradition which vouches for these things. Just to give a couple of examples from my own discipline, there's the concept of Ishvara that comes in Yoga Sutra. Perhaps not many would see this sutra in this light, but I am always fascinated with this idea. It says, Klesha karma vipaka ashayaihi aparamrishtaha purusha visheshaha Ishvara. It is defining the concept of Ishvara. It says, Vishesha Purusha, a special Purusha is an Ishvara. And why is he special? Or why is it special? It uses 4 qualifying terms. It says, Klesha, Karma, Vipaka, and Ashaya. Klesha, the patterns of the mind. Karma, the action one engages with. Then Vipaka is the samskara or the imprints. and Vasana, Ashaya are the tendencies which make him or her go back to whatever his choices were. So these four normally limit an individual, and any individual who is not limited by these four is a Ishvara. So the very concept of Ishvara, whatever we understand in a religious context, everything has been sanitized here. Not only that, it is also highly empowering and liberating in the sense anyone who is capable of raising himself or herself to this level where they are no more limited by these four can attain the status of Ishvara. This is one concept. If I just go into the Devatas idea also, in any simple pujas that we do, we have a list of Devatas that we list out. You have a Kshetra Devata, you have a Grama Devata, you have a Kula Devata, you have a Ishta Devata. So just the idea that there is a possibility of Ishta Devata and a Kula Devata. The family deity need not be your own personal deity. This kind of freedom that it promises, I think this is something unparalleled. Or the ideas like Avahana and Udvasana. You take an object, you invoke the presence, and after your engagement with it, you're also dissolving it so that you're no more tied to that paraphernalia. Your connection with the principle. The moment the connection is established with the principle, you don't get into unnecessary fights. I mean, you take into any matter, like I have been working with a school, an institution called School of Philosophy in Europe, which has been there for nearly 40, 50 years. And most of them have vouched for this. They say that since their exposure to Vedanta, their appreciation and understanding of Christ has improved. I think this is what the Indian knowledge systems are capable of doing by the very fact, the kind of freedom that they promise, that the kind of ideas that they bring in. I think personal liberty, pluralism is something that IKS stands for.
Delve into that right now, but perhaps the question is also about how do we answer the issues that the activists around some of these issues raised, right? So that I think it was the concern that was expressed in the
I
question.
just tell you, see, he quoted the same sutra. The same sutra can be interpreted. The sutra says Purusha Visheshaha Ishvaraha, not Sri Vishesha. Okay. So this is the kind of misunderstanding that is prevailing in society, and this is all completely baseless. Okay. In fact, our thing, so since he was saying, you find plenty of examples. So gunaha pujasthanam gunishu nacha lingam nacha vayaha. See, there are dozens of examples which we can quote from this, and it has been the practice of the society. And that is what is beautifully reflected in the literature.
But maybe we need to do more in terms of just translating some of these ideas into answers to these questions, right? Lenses to how to look at this question. But okay, so let's now open it up to the audience. I'm sorry it took us some time to sort of get this all started, but we'll not. It does not mean that we will not end it, right? We'll end it soon also. But any questions from the audience before we end? Please, I'll come to you, please. Yeah. So the mic will come to you. Please, tell your name. No. Unko bataiye. She rose her hand first. And then please mention if there is a specific panelist who you want to ask the question to, and then your question. I request you to be brief, please.
Thank you so much for whatever we have been learning and hearing. I'm Dr. Richa from IIT Kharagpur. And one thing that I have been able to construe from the entire discussion is that everything boils down to mental health, memory, attention, learning, and that how the minds are being impinged with unfiltrated information, and that leads to all kinds of flux in the mind of the individual. So what happens, what I understand is it is the mind that is fundamental. The emotions are fundamental to every human being. And if that is properly dealt with, that can be the way forward. So what I was thinking is that principles from, say, Panchakosha, or about the Sharira, Sukshma, Sthula, talking about the Prana, the Nadi, the Chitta, the nature of the mind, the flux of the mind, and then telling the students or anybody, even adults, I would say, the various kind of yogic interventions, meditation, rather than just bringing yoga and meditation, but in a very methodical manner from school, if this could be given, what is the possibility? Because if we teach children about the physical body and that vitamin A is good for you, they learn it and they grow with it. So why cannot we teach our students about these principles from the childhood so that they know how to manage their minds, their emotions, and what is good for them? I think that would be something which will go a long way, but I just need comments on this. And if it is doable and to bring it in this manner into the school curriculum and into the college also. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
So quick answer is it is doable, and we are attempting towards that. The only thing is we have to necessarily train people who will be able to communicate this philosophy very clearly. So that is where the bottleneck is. So the political situation is certainly far better, but we need to create people.
Also, let us not forget the role of the parents. Not everything happens at school. In fact, the main education is at home. So if the parents are going to show the opposite direction, then you will get a conflict, even if the schools do better in this mission which you have spent out. No, but they will have to be educated. So it's a long process anyway.
No, but I hope you got the answer to your question.
That is what. See, even the counselors, I don't strictly believe in their solutions because they themselves need counseling. But I'm just saying.
No, but I think the answer was pretty precise, actually, that it is possible and that there are efforts that, are being made right now. And what is also absolutely clear, I think, to all of us is that the systemic facilitation is clearly there right now. It is better. I think the bottlenecks are elsewhere and they need to be overcome. Right? But
why sciences lies embedded in the form of museums, our heritage sites. They are in a symbolic language. So a methodology for putting the museums should be developed, and perhaps it can be a new discipline. Because many high sciences are in the form of museums. Science is preserved in the form of museums. So there is a need to have a new discipline how to decode our museums.
Yeah, see, one should be little careful in making the statement and taking it very literally also. Some legends necessarily carry something, but all legends need not necessarily be integrated. So this is where I think one will be really in a slippery slope when we try to make a general sweeping statement that these are encoded, etc. So there is now no unique way also. Let me add. It all depends on the specific discipline in the specific context. So one finds several problems even in exact sciences. So in fact, I must tell Michel, a few days back he was calling over phone. I told I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and I was working on this. So let me tell you, I have been doing this mathematics for the past 25 years at least, in this Indian text. So one verse I had to break my head for 2.5 hours. Okay, so that is how, so the terms have been employed and we have a lot of interesting samasas and so on. And we have to just ensure that our interpretation is congruent with other interpretations elsewhere. So one needs to build scholarship to look into texts, even as Rammanohar was mentioning a little while ago. So our primary aim should be in trying to promote scholars who can take it up very seriously. So simultaneously, of course, IKS can be developed and research scholars can, I'm sure this all will help, but we need to essentially build real scholarship in variety of disciplines, which will take maybe 5 to 10 years. And then I think we can see how it really flowers up.
Yeah, the question is to Sudarshan. I got it from a student. So IKS is established that need to be applied in roots first. Coming from Western educations, you can see in schools,
it is focused to speak only in English, like the same here in this conference. I believe language is one that unite. Shouldn't our languages be promoted in schools so that we get to learn better and maybe even get to take more interest in IKS? What is your opinion?
Okay. So I actually, the answer is yes. So I come from a tradition which actually says the Vedanta and Sanskrit is not enough. We have a tradition called Ubhaya Vedanta. We say what is there in Sanskrit is not good enough to understand the world. Right? So we have a separate Vedanta in Tamil Bhasha itself. So there's an entire architecture of all of this built in Tamil. Right? So what does this even mean? Right? The whole notion that Sanskrit is the carrier is good, but so are all the other languages. Right? So given that perspective, obviously it makes sense to promote the mother tongue and the regional language also. But now, coming from again the model perspective, it really does not matter what language the model is expressed in. Right? So once knowledge and pedagogy starts at a model level, all of these are symbol spaces only. Right? So it's a model that's get manipulated to explain phenomena. So for that, whether the model is in Sanskrit, Tamil, English, MATLAB, Python, how does it matter? Right? So unless the understanding of seeing the world as models comes to engineers, creation across systems will not happen. So that should be one pedagogy perspective that should be there, especially in engineering education or education which is on the creative side, creator side rather.
But I think overall there cannot really be any doubt on promoting, languages in schools. I think there's enough work done now on how early education needs to be in languages which are local in some sense. But how do we navigate an existing ecosystem where English is prevalent everywhere? With this idea is, I think, something that we are still grappling with. I think we'll have to, go ahead and figure out how to make it better. Yes. So I think two more questions and we'll have to end because we are really breaking into your lunch time.
So, is it audio? So, my name is Dr. Samsir. I'm coming from Sri Ramakrishna College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore. My question is to Ramasubramanian sir. So, it is regarding the thing that you talked about regarding reverences and that approach, the reverence approach. And the thing is that in Western philosophy, it is anything that Guru sees that the student can argue. But in the Eastern philosophy, more of a, acceptance or more experiential learning was required. So how can we develop this particular, experiential learning like Nachiketa says in Katha Upanishad, that Katha Upanishad in Nachiketa that he has been, identified as a good questioner since he is not asking arguments, he is actually accepting the things that the Guru says. So how can we actually develop this kind of attitude in these students in the modern system?
Yeah. So the premise with which you have posed this question itself is wrong. That in the Western philosophy, it is inquiry is more encouraged, whereas in Indian philosophy, we have to just accept what the Guru says. No. This has to be very, very clear in your minds. So this, nowhere it is said that you have to just accept what is being stated. Having said that, if you read carefully, I'll just tell you. So there will be question after question after question after question. And at some stage, irrespective of the discipline in which you are dealing with, so one has to really contemplate and get solution for himself. Okay? So this is one level of answer. The other thing that I wanted to tell you was, so here in this Indian philosophical systems, so all of the knowledge that we find is all Shishya Sambhada, And samvada does not mean you have to just accept. So the morning I didn't have an occasion. Even today, I mean, we will just ask our own in traditional system. So I may be able to silence my student, okay, in IIT, and maybe he will get silenced because he may be worried about the grade. But in our Gurukula system, there is no grades. See, they can keep on asking, and we do, in fact, ask, how is it possible? How is it possible? How is it possible? And at some stage, Guru may say, this is all they have said, this is all my understanding is. And then we have to just probe further. But you should not have a feeling that whatever is stated has to be just accepted. Number two, one more small thing. When we say this, I also want to say one more thing. This analytic mind is all perfectly fine. But without the grounding, if you just keep analyzing, then you will end up nowhere. So this analytic faculty clubbed with a certain grounding will always help, but without that, it is not going to help. Okay, later we can discuss.
Just a quick remark I can add. In fact, the very example that you quoted from Kathopanishad, in fact, if you see at the end of the first chapter, Yama tries to discourage him like anything. He discourages him. He says, see, Baba, there's a lot of confusion. Why are you getting into this?
Entices.
And then he discourages him, he even chides him, and then he tempts him. He says, I can give you anything that you desire for the latest cars with music systems. I mean, he goes on like this, and to the point where Nachiketa says, if you have any honor in your word, I want an answer to this question. That's when Yama steps back. I think that's the most beautiful part that's there of the Kathopanishad. And I think this is the approach in most of the Upanishads as well, the kind of conversation, the inquiry continues.
Okay, so one last question from our friend there. He was raising his hand with a lot of excitement, actually. I could not miss that question. Please.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. This is Kavan from Mysore. I'm a parapsychologist and a researcher. So my question for the esteemed panelist, I really loved your conversation. Thank you for this. So how does IKS integrate the discovery and the phenomenon of UAPs and extraterrestrial technology, which happens to be a major defense intelligence power in the West these days, considering, it has major disrupting and socio-economic and religious implications? Thank you.
No, I didn't get your question properly. What is UAV?
UAP is unmanned aerial phenomena, something like an extraterrestrial technology or things which has been testified in the Congress and, in the US lately. So there has been a lot of debate, noise around these, aspects. So I just want to know whether if there are ways in which our system, can interpret these phenomena.
Unarmed phenomena.
So unidentified flying objects is what they were called earlier, UFOs. So these, discs that we would see that people supposedly felt had come from outside, some other planet, things like that. So anything that we've not been able to identify, floating around, that's out of the technology people. So how does IKS look at that? I think that's the question. Do we believe in it? How do we look at it? Things like that. So
No. See, there are certain phenomena which can be observed by naked eye. There are certain phenomena which need not be observed by naked eye. So as far as IKS, when we talk about a few centuries ago, so it is only with respect to this phenomena which can be observed only through naked eye. Through aided instruments, no. But there are certain other things which we have definitely, as you were saying, this Nachiketa's question, etc. We have really contemplated upon certain things, and then we have come up with a solution which will be extremely useful, which can neither be negated nor can be substantiated. But if we work with a certain model, it is going to be beneficial, is something which can be definitely proved. So based on that, certain things have been stated. And this is all I would just say, because I don't understand your question properly. I don't want to elaborate if others can say yes.
Yeah, I think you can discuss with the panelists later. Let's wind it all up. I'm sorry, but I think we are really, people will probably. So Michel just said there are enough problems on Earth as it is. And so maybe that's why one of those problems is what is waiting for us right away. So let's launch into that. But thank you very much for being a patient audience. Most of the time it was just listening, but I think just listening also contributes significantly to all we have to learn. There are some points that I have made. I don't really have the time to summarize all of that. But one thing that I am at least taking away from this session is that there are implications on the individual, on the family, on the society, on Janapada, on the country, on the whole world of what we can and what we are aspiring to do as a part of the IKS. It is still very nebulous. It is nascent stages. We need to do a lot of things, some meta things and some concrete things, and eventually be able to institutionalize and mainstream, like it was pointed out in the panel. I think this gathering and the unlike mine, the non-gray and non-white hair is very, very promising. If this interest continues for quite some time, for a decade or two maybe, I think we will be in a position where we want to go, as we discussed here. So thank you very much for being patient. Thank you so much to the panelists. I think a better panel could hardly have been organized on a topic like this. Thank you very much. And I think unless there are more announcements, we are ready to go for lunch.
Hair is somewhat deceptive nowadays.
A lively, enriching experience. I also thank you for your esteemed presence and for being a part of the conference. Now we invite all of you to join us for the lunch. Kindly join us after 45 minutes. Thank you.